It's time for a game changer! I'm Sam Arano, and this is the recap video for my special on the Jewish history of Mexico, in which I talk about things I left out of the videos, correct mistakes that I made in the videos, and answer questions from Gaon and Navi level patrons on Patreon. This is just for one episode and should be pretty short, so let's just get into it. Gaon level patron Jordan Gorelkin asks, how was the Jewish food in Mexico City? Was it similar to the quality of the Jewish food in New York City? So, firstly, I had a great time in Mexico. I'd never been before. It was during the week around Independence Day, which was great fun. And I consciously tried to do more than I actually could realistically, which gives me a great excuse to go back. To anyone interested in going, I'd say that I liked it overall more than New York, but less than Chicago. As for the food, I want to make clear that I didn't just eat Jewish food. That was just for the video. In fact, I would highly recommend Tacos Frontera on the corner of Frontera and Alvaro Obregón, but do watch your head there because the awning is bizarrely low and made of iron. Nor did I eat at every Jewish restaurant in Mexico City. I ate at that bagel place near the documentation center. I ate at Mendel Delicatessen. And there's also a very prolific Jewish chef in Mexico named Daniel Ovadia, who has a bunch of restaurants all over the city. I went to his breakfast chain, Peltre, and I went to his bar Sod, which is Hebrew for secret, and is an Israeli-themed rooftop speakeasy that's only accessible through an escape room. What I'm saying is that my sample size isn't huge, but overall, I didn't find any of the Jewish food I had in Mexico City to be as good as the best Jewish food I've had in New York. Gaon level patron Cheese 101 asks, for Sephardic immigrants arriving from the Balkans, did their Iberian roots and Ladino play much of a role in their integration into Mexican society? Due to the unique challenge of researching for this video, using mostly sources only available in print in private collections, it's hard for me to go back and answer questions like this. I can only say that, in the brief period before the Mexican Revolution, Sephardic Jewish immigrants from the Balkans certainly experienced much more economic upward mobility than their Ashkenazi counterparts. And while I never read anything explicitly stating that the similarity between Ladino and Standard Spanish helped facilitate that, it's hard to imagine it didn't. What complicates this is that Jewish immigrants from the Ottoman Empire to the Americas just tended to come from more consistently middle-class backgrounds to begin with, whereas Jewish immigrants from the Russian Empire to the Americas spanned the full spectrum. On that note, I saw a lot of discussion in the comments over how well I spoke Spanish, with some saying I spoke it very well in the small moments I recorded it, and others saying it was really bad. I was surprised by the number of people who were shocked that I spoke Spanish at all, because 1, you don't know me, and 2, I grew up in a part of the world that wasn't just part of the Spanish and Mexican empires, but where Spanish continued to be the main language for a surprisingly long time after becoming part of the US, to the point that people moving in from other parts of the US were expected to assimilate by learning Spanish. With that said, I wasn't raised speaking Spanish. My parents don't speak it, my grandparents don't speak it, so I did start learning in school. However, what I ended up learning was a weird mix of dialects, so there was Castilian, Jaliscan, Chilean, and Venezuelan, plus 2 dialects of Spanish that are only spoken in California, which are Californio, which is the very upper-class dialect of the original Spanish colonists and their descendants, pretty similar to Castilian, and Calo, which is the Spanish dialect of Greater Los Angeles specifically, and is basically 50% loanwords from English and 50% curse words. If you've ever heard Santeria by Sublime or Que Onda Güero by Beck, that's Calo. So when I arrived, I suddenly realized I'd never learned the Spanish of Mexico City, which wasn't really a problem. It's no different from not knowing the specific English dialect of New York. Any interaction on the street, we understood each other 99%. And while I started learning Hebrew before Spanish, Spanish is definitely my second language. I'm way more comfortable in it than speaking Hebrew, which I'm still pretty comfortable with. 12 years ago, I visited Spain and never had to use English, except in Catalonia, because this was the height of the independence movement, and if you tried to speak Spanish there, people would just spitefully refuse and insist on speaking English. I should say I've been to Barcelona since then, and they don't do that anymore. But in Madrid or Andalusia, it was all Spanish, no problem. With that said, I have to wonder what people are thinking when they hear me speaking Spanish in the most upper-class aristocratic accent, but with the vocabulary of some East LA skater kid. So, in case you were wondering, that's how I sound in every language. Join me in the weeks to come as I roll out the results of last May's viewer survey, and then we jump back into the 1920s, this time in the Jewish diaspora. Special thanks to my patrons, including Mir Akbar Ali, Jeremy Biskin, Boris Cherny, FC, Matthew Feinberg, Jay Fleischman, Osher Gordon, Bob Huddy, Raphael Kellerman, Sol Cohn, Jacob Kossoff, and Jeffrey Schweitzer, and I will see you soon.